Cinderella goes back a long ways at the studio. Their script's going back to the 1930s.
When they finally decided to do Cinderella in 1948, it was at a time when they weren't really sure what was going to happen to the studio financially.
The word believing is all the way through this movie. And usually, if Walt believed hard enough, it worked for him.
I think that he was rolling the dice and praying. I think he did a lot of that.
It was very typical of Walt to go out on a limb and take a risk. And in some ways, you know, this was the biggest risk he took.
Walt had not had a big financial success since Snow White. Snow White, that was it. By the end of the Second World War, he was $4 million in debt.
If Cinderella had lost money, I think that would have been the end of Disney animation, or at least the end of Disney feature animation, because although Snow White had been such a huge hit, Pinocchio and Fantasia had both lost money the first time out.
It's true. The studio went through very hard times, particularly during the war years. In fact, they were kept afloat by training films for the United States government. And the South American films that they made for the Good Neighbor policy of Roosevelt. So Walt and Roy decided that the way they could save the company would be through diversification. So they started to do live action films. They started to put together short cartoons into a feature format. That's why you see films like Make Mine Music and Melody Time.
And they did okay, but they weren't really big hits, and they didn't really establish Disney's storytelling as he had done.
They made back their costs anyway, but you can't keep in business very long. It was a question of survival. And let's make a feature, or let's sell the business.
Walt remarked, we need a story with a girl in trouble. That usually works. You know, Snow White just worked.
Everybody loves a story of an underdog. We love a story where you are rooting for this girl to rise up above the oppression.
Well, believe it or not, I think that Walt identified with that. Walt was from a humble background. He had big dreams, big hopes, but he had nothing to start with except his imagination. And with his imagination, he built an empire. He built a world.
Walt had a pretty tough childhood. He had worked on a farm. He had delivered newspapers when it was 25 degrees below. And yet he believed in the Hollywood dream, the American dream. He felt that he had achieved that dream himself and that he somehow had this power to give it to people.
And here, encapsulated with this one little poor, pathetic little girl who's been put upon, and she has nothing, some wonderful things happened to her.
I think part of the reason Walt Disney had to have been attracted to Cinderella, and some of the reason that I'm attracted to Cinderella, is because I'm a Cinderella story. I started off as a poor kid, and here I am. Walt started off as a poor kid, and he became Walt Disney.
I think at the heart of all of the classic Disney films is transformation. That's what we're animating. We're animating those moments. For Pinocchio to become a real boy, for Cinderella to imagine herself as chosen by the prince and dressed in this beautiful gown.
The transformation scene of Cinderella in rags into Cinderella in that beautiful ball gown, Walt Disney said was his favorite piece of animation.
I must say I've always felt very good about it. I don't think it's the best piece of animation ever done, but it was something that hit the heart and it struck Walt.
Which, of course, comes from a man who loved the idea of transformation in life into something better, bigger, grander, more beautiful.
We all have dreams like that. I think that's one major reason this story has been told for 900 years.
There are 90,000 variations of the Cinderella story, and Walt Disney knew the power of it. It has all the great elements. Every girl wants to meet a prince. Every prince wants to meet a beautiful girl.
It's a story that everybody knows. But Walt took that story and made so much more of it. One, he took the basic story and created these wonderful scenes that make that story so much more effective and cinematic. I mean, take, for example, the scene where the two ugly sisters tear the ball gown of Cinderella. I mean, that is quite a dramatic scene. And that's a very, very effective way of getting that story over. But he then set up this parallel story with the animals.
Walt and his crew came up with this wonderful subplot, the mice and the cat.
And the only thing holding these two stories together is Cinderella herself. But Walt set them up in this marvelous counterpoint.
It's one of those classic films that you can hang entertainment on, because the story is so bare bones in a way. You know, it's good and evil, and it's, you know, triumphing, you know, at the end. But on that framework, they're able to hang so many wonderful, entertaining bits and bring out such interesting personalities.
All those wonderful things that happen, the shoe breaking, is the Disney version. It's a very, very good story. Very, very well told.
And for 3 generations of Americans, a Cinderella story means Walt Disney's telling of the story, because it's told so well.
Thank you.
Had Cinderella flopped, there wouldn't be any Walt Disney animation afterwards. And luckily, it was a huge hit. It was almost its own story from rags to riches.